Hello! This Crank Along series is going to show you how to knit the Susan sock pattern from Dina Bean Sock Machines. And of course, there are lots of different ways to knit socks. This is just one method. The benefit of this one is that when the sock comes off the machine, it is 100% done. There's nothing else that has to be, no sewing or anything. I also particularly like this wedge heel because you don't have any holes at all at the corner, which is something that new crankers often struggle with. So it starts with a 1 up, 2 down method for making the heel, and then, for making the toe, and then the wedge heel like I mentioned, and then there is a hung hem with a latch tool bind off for the final cuff. This is meant to be a crank along where you can grab your supplies and join me as we knit this sock together. Let's get started. For supplies, you're going to want 100 grams of sock yarn, which is about 400 yards. Fingering weight sock yarn works best on the Dina Bean sock machine, and we always recommend 20% nylon. If this is one of your first Dina Bean projects, we recommend using a thinner weight fingering weight sock yarn. It makes it just a little bit easier to knit. Here I have two side by side. You can see these are both considered fingering weight sock yarn, but this one is actually quite a bit thicker than this one. So the thinner the yarn, the easier it is when you're first learning. The tension can just be a little looser and it's just a little bit more forgiving. You're also going to want some waste yarn in a sharply contrasting color, but about the same weight. So again, if you have a thin sock yarn or project yarn, you're going to want a thin waste yarn as well. For this project, you're actually going to want 2 ravel cores will be helpful. And it's handy to have about 6 pieces of scrap yarn nearby, perhaps one in a contrasting color. You'll need a set of weighted heel forks. Tools that we always use, of course, include a setup bonnet, but you can just use a scrap tube of knitting if you don't yet have a setup bonnet. You'll need a set of soft weights. I have a heavy, medium, and light. I mainly use the medium, and on the 2.0 machine, just under 2 pounds, I find to be the most ideal, with a cable ring, of course. And then from this set of tools, I have the loom tool, which is a little less sharp. I have a pick tool, which is very sharp, a latch tool, some darning needles. I always keep my screwdriver nearby, a pair of tweezers for picking up drop stitches, and then it's often handy to have some weighted clips. I also like to keep my yarn winder nearby so that after you crank your gauge swatch, it's easy to wind the yarn back up and go again. For measuring gauge, I like to have a piece of paper and a pencil so I can trace my foot, or whoever's foot I'm making the socks for. But I also like to print out a copy of the worksheet that comes with the sock pattern. And so you can just trace on the back of the worksheet if you want. And then again, you'll want a ruler to measure. And then I also like to have 2 stick pins nearby, and you might want a soft tape measure to measure around your foot. Today I'm using a 60 needle cylinder, but you'll want to use whatever size helps get you the width of the tube that you want and the drape of the fabric that you want, which also could change based on the specific yarn that you're using. Before we get started with our project, I wanted to make sure we're oriented the same way as I'm sharing directions, and these are the same ones that we use in our written patterns. So I think of the machine itself as a clock. So 12 o'clock is up here. I'm right in front of the row counter. And I get this question a lot. I mean on the part of the camshell that does not move. So people often ask if the 12 o'clock is on the cylinder, but of course the cylinder moves, so that's hard for me to wrap my head around how 12 o'clock would keep spinning around. So for me, and in all of our videos, 12 o'clock always means right here at the top, no matter what's happening with the cylinder. So then 6 o'clock is down here, right in the center, 9 o'clock, and 3 o'clock. I often have instructions to stop with the main mark at 4 o'clock, and in my mind that's about, it's roughly here between the cable post and the side of the side gear. And then I often also provide instructions to stop with a particular mark at the break in the yarn feeder. And so I mean right here. If we then look at the cylinder itself, there's a whole page on the Dina Bean site for marking your cylinder, and it has diagrams for every size cylinder for how many needles go between the marks. And of course you can use any color you want. On our videos, it's always consistent that black is the main mark, red is the halfway mark. There are 4 pink target marks, and we'll be using all 4 of them for hanging our cuff. We'll be using 2 of them for the decreases in our toe. And then there are 2 blue wedge heel targets, and we'll be using those for our wedge heel in this pattern. The final reference I use often is I will say to go to the right or left of a particular mark. And I always mean when looking at the cylinder from the outside. So if this is the main mark and I'm referencing the needle to the right of the main mark, it's this needle. Okay, so the one to the right when you're looking from the outside of the cylinder. Visit us at dinandbean.com and please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.